The second time that I OD'd was accidental. It landed me back in the hospital. 30 minutes after I was released, I went back to shooting dope. Next thing you know, I'm laying down on the carpet with a gun to the back of my head, and I'm starting to mouth off to the guys, and they kick me in the back of the head and smashed my face down and told me not to move. I don't know what happened, but I got away. I ran to the bathroom, locked the door, and 2 stories head first out of the window and ran. I left everything there.
This is what drugs did to me. This is where it got me. It got me right here on this patch of dirt with a 3-man dome tent.
Yes, I'd rather go and play, but I first must let the sun heal me today.
Next thing you know, the drugs take a hold of you and it sucked the life right out of me.
We ended up giving him a Volkswagen bus that we had. And I think he lived in that for a couple of years.
I lost everything. I had no place to live, and then I lost my van and being out on the streets, so this is one of the areas that I used to frequent all the time. In fact, we used to call it home. Didn't care who was around me, I was gonna get high. There was one time that I came down here, and they thought that I had robbed a big shipment of heroin. So it was just me and 2 guys with a 38 stub nose behind my head, and they were gonna kill me.
You never know what's gonna happen to you, so you have to watch yourself.
Every night I come down here, I'm afraid. It's so dark down here, and you know, there's a lot of spiders. There's a lot of raccoons down here, and they try to come up and get your food. I just want to get my life back, you know. This is not the way of living.
I was totally disrespectful to my father and to my mother, and there was a time where me and my dad got in a confrontation, and I threatened him. I told him, I said, hey, I'm gonna burn your house down. And my dad knew the type of guy that I was at that time, and so he was afraid of me. And so the next day, he went and got a restraining order on me.
He looked like a heavy meth user. He was difficult to follow in conversation. He was pretty far gone.
Dennis was probably too far gone for us to waste our time on. And at that point, we really didn't think that there was much hope for Dennis.
The whole world was closing in on him.
The noose was getting tighter. And so I left California for 5 years.
He started having problems in Colorado, where they actually, SWAT team came and actually kicked down the front door. And trouble would follow him wherever he would go.
I remember going to family functions and sitting down with him and then nodding out because I'd been up for so long.
His teeth were getting discolored. He would just look really unkempt.
I put my mom and dad through hell. I put them through hell. Never knowing when the phone was gonna ring that, hey, Mrs. Martinez or Mr. Martinez, would you come down to the county morgue?
Toughest thing about my job is notifying the next of kin of a sudden traumatic and unexpected death.
My husband and I spent many years, day and night, waiting for phone calls that somebody had killed Dennis.
On a good bender, we call it a binge or bender, Freddie Fender, I would do drugs all night and all day for up to a week at a time. Then I'd go to the liquor store and get me a jug of vodka, put it in a brown paper sack, and drink it on the beach straight. And I'd get the drive heaves, and I would start throwing up, throwing up, throwing up.
I heard that he was on the beach picking up cans. I was like, what? Are you sure? They're like, yeah, he's been down there for a long time. And I was like, wow, that's sad.
I'd ask people, hey, whatever happened to Christian? People would tell me about how, you know, Christian was all methed out.
Here I am, from 95 to 99, addicted to crystal meth, smoking it, even tried shooting it at one time. Ultimately just was addicted, completely dependent upon it. I've had to, you know, help revive people. I've had to keep people alive while partying right there next to them. Talk about insane, you know what I mean? Think about that. You're sitting there and somebody's like almost dying and you're yet keeping them alive, but yet still partying the same drug that nearly killed that person. And you're doing it, pushing the limits of life. And so many of my friends have just pushed it to the limit and fell off and died. And yet I still continued to use drugs. Ignorantly. Living ignorantly, thinking I'm invincible, I'm untouchable. I know how to do this. I'm smart. Everyone thinks they're smarter than someone else that doesn't make it.
He didn't look good. He looked really bad, so it kind of wasn't a surprise to me. All of a sudden, he's on his way to prison.
Christian Stoy wasn't a big shock that he went to prison.
My arrest was pretty surprising.
Drugs was never an issue in my house. I had a really, really good childhood with Kent and my mom. My mom was like my best friend until she died.
I think the only tools he had, you know, to deal with that were getting loaded and getting violent.
Jay was all about punk rock, pedal to the metal.
When the punk rock days came out, every night was just drinking beer, going up to Hollywood, and, you know, in order for me to have a good night, somebody had to have a really bad night. I had a taste of the heroin, and things really got bad. I mean, really bad. So I used toilet water, gutter water. I shared needles with guys that looked like they were dying of AIDS. They were HIV positive, and I didn't even care. I really didn't care if I lived or died.
Years of abuse would finally catch up with Dogtown's favorite son. The price of dope had escalated far beyond its street value.
$1996, September 5th, it was my last run.
Dennis went through, probably been on a 3 or 4 day drug binge, and I knew something was wrong, terribly wrong. He was crying and he was in a corner, just tucked in a corner in his room.
I knocked on the door and I hear this voice come across. Yeah. How can you come up from that type of sitting position, flat on the floor like this, and you just move up? It made me feel that something had manifested.
That night I met the devil that was eating inside my brother. I mean, was throwing him around the room.
You tell me, right there, it's right there, right by you, Mom, right by you.
Dennis had believed that he had killed someone. My mother and father did come over to the house, and they were going to take him to the church.
He was at his very last straw. I just saw just a lot of anguish in his face, and he wasn't looking at me, he was looking at the ground, and he had been crying, you could tell. I realized real quickly that he was non-receptive, and every time I'd asked him a question, he was very agitated. He basically looked up, and this is the first time he had eye contact with me, and he said, "What are you talking about?" I says, "Dennis, what do you hear?" He said, "I hear the clock. What are you talking about?" "I hear the clock." I said, "In the same way that you now have the discipline to hear the ticking of the clock, you now know that God, in the same way, has been speaking to you, and He has a plan for your life, and that there was this transforming moment, that he was never the same." And I had never seen Dennis Martinez look back.
There was a definite change. Dennis was never the same.
My life has changed forever now because of one right decision in my life.
That he would volunteer his time at the Youth Crisis Hotline. He would come and say, whatever you want me to do, I'm there to help. Whatever it was, Dennis Martinez was there.
You know, I've been 9 years clean and sober, and I keep repeating numbers because I keep tabs of every day walking clean and sober.
Spiritual markers in your life actually come to life, like just being nicknamed Christ in '85, inventing the Christ era in the late '80s, and ultimately my name is Christian in the first place. Wore crosses my whole life. It is quite ironic. In January of 2000, I go to prison and finally hit rock bottom,